Vice Admiral Mark Norman has been in the news quite a bit over the last year, over the last several months, with regard to a major case that was before the Canadian courts. And many of you have actually emailed my office or called in to figure out what was going on. So what I want to try and do is give you a bit of an overview now that a bunch of information has come to light, so that you can understand what happened and why this is just such a damning indictment of Justin Trudeau. So I'm going to cite a bunch of media stories. So it's not me telling you this. This is a story that has played out in the media over the last year. So I'm actually going to read from a story that is in the National Post today. If you want to read it, it's the title of the story is "With Mark Norman, the Liberals again demonstrate their disrespect for justice." So, mainstream media article. The Navy Vice Admiral and former Deputy Chief of Defense Staff has won his legal battle. What happens next is anyone's guess, but it's hard to imagine it being good news for the federal government. Admiral Norman was the former head of the Royal Canadian Navy and the second highest serving officer in the Canadian Armed Forces when he was relieved of duty in 2017. The RCMP was called in by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's government to investigate the alleged leaking of cabinet secrets to Davy, a Quebec-based shipbuilding firm. In 2015, the firm had been contracted to urgently convert a civilian vessel into a naval supply ship after Canada's two elderly supply vessels were retired. So the Harper Tories gave Davy a sole source contract to do the conversion work, but when the Liberals won the election later that year, they seemed less than enthused about the plan. There's no firm explanation as to why, but it's been theorized that the former Liberal cabinet minister, Scott Bryson, who has resigned recently, was advocating for a shipbuilder in Atlantic Canada, a different shipbuilder, with whom he is personally friendly, to get the work that the prospect of the upcoming Norman trial influenced his recent decision to quit politics. So this story, the front end of this story really breaks down what's at the heart of this. In 2015, under our former Conservative government, and this was then Defense Minister Jason Kenney and now Premier Jason Kenney, recognized the fact that we needed a supply ship. We didn't really have one. So he wanted to get something out as quickly as possible. The decision was made, and now all of this information is out, to retrofit an existing ship so that our men and women in uniform would have the equipment that they need. Then, as this story talks about, the Liberals came into power, and there was leaked documents that came out that showed that they wanted to reverse this, and as this document speculates on, that it might have had something to do with a shipbuilding company that a former Liberal cabinet minister was personally friendly with. So then all of a sudden, Mark Norman there was charges laid against him for breaching cabinet confidence, and he was really dragged through the mud in this over the last year. And this week, the Crown stayed the charges against him. So in this article, the National Post, this is what they say. Norman's lawyer agreed that the prosecutor had independently chosen to drop the case, but also accused the Prime Minister's office and the Privy Council office, the country's federal bureaucracy, until recently led by who? Michael Wernick of SNC-Lavalin fame, who just stepped down after not being caught in a dissimilar scandal around SNC-Lavalin, of trying to sabotage Norman's defense by withholding access to critical documents. And this is the quote from Mark Norman's lawyer: "You should be very concerned when anyone tries to erode the resilience of the justice system or demonstrates a failure to understand why it's so fundamental to the democratic values we hold so dear. Don't put your finger and try to weigh in on the scales of justice. That's not what should be happening. So today, I asked a question in the House of Commons exactly related to this. I said, look, the Conservatives, and you can watch it. So have a watch. Our former Conservative government made the decision to retrofit a ship in order to get much-needed equipment to our Navy. Then leaked documents show that the Liberals tried to stop this after a company that's friendly to the party was cheesed that they didn't get the contract. After this leak prevented the Liberals from taking this unwise course of action, they attempted to destroy the career of one of Canada's most senior military officers whose only crime was wanting to get a ship for our Navy. Why?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Madam Speaker, as I've said a number of times in this House and outside this House, it is the RCMP that investigates in such matters. The RCMP investigated, turned evidence over to the Prosecution Service, Madam Speaker. It is the Prosecution Service of Canada, which operates independently of government, that evaluated the evidence, that decided to lay charges, that proceeded with the trial, Madam Speaker, and ultimately decided to stay charges. Madam Speaker, all of this was undertaken independent of the government. There was no political interference, as she herself had said.
So the answer that the Justice Minister gave me in response to asking, like, why did you even lay these charges, right? Was really a bunch of obfuscation, because they're trying to beat around the bush on what actually happened here. It was actually Justin Trudeau who demanded the process that led to these charges against Mark Norman. And this is laid out in a Globe and Mail article entitled RCMP Lay Breach of Trust Against Vice Admiral Mark Norman. So again, this is mainstream media, not just me saying this. And it was Trudeau who was the one who said Norman would end up in court months before the charges were laid. On April 6, 2017, he said, "As I've said before, I support the Chief of Defense Staff in the decision that he took. This is an important matter that is obviously under investigation and will likely end up before the courts." And then Trudeau went on to make a claim about the case heading to court before any charges were laid on February 1st, 2018. This is in a CBC News article. And there's just this raft of information that shows that the Prime Minister's office was very aware of what was going on and was weighing in on this. So the question really is did the Prime Minister's office try to ruin the career of one of Canada's top military officers because a leak document kind of prevented them from interfering in a shipbuilding contract that was awarded to get a supply ship as soon as possible, as opposed to, as has been mused about in these articles, getting really cozy with a company that was super friendly with Scott Bryson. There are so many things that are wrong with this, but let's break down the problems. So first of all, that is not how we should be making decisions about military procurement in Canada, right? Like, look, at the end of the day, what is the objective? Different people and different organizations will say, well, the objective of military procurement is to, have industrial benefits and all these different sorts of things. We can have an argument on that. At the end of the day, the objective is to get equipment for our men and women in uniform, depending on the capabilities that we need. And in 2015, our former Conservative government, under Jason Kenney as the defense minister, said, you know what? We need a supply ship. This is how we're going to do it, right? And the leaked documents showed that the Liberals really gave pause for thought on that, or that something was going on, as these articles lay out. So that is problematic to begin with. But then to lay charges against a man, and then, again, I didn't go into this in detail, the PMO and the PCO are accused by Mark Norman's lawyers of withholding documents, and we know that they did, that were material to his own defense, is a big deal, right? Like, it kind of smells like a witch hunt, right? It was not so great. Then, on the other side of it, this looks a lot like the SNC-Lavalin scandal, doesn't it? It really speaks to a pattern of behavior, or alleged behavior, within the Prime Minister's office on how they treat procurement as well as friends, and how they treat their perceived enemies. So that's really what you need to consider here. The question that I asked, to me, is a pretty good summary of what went on in this situation, is alleged to have gone in this situation. And it's, if you have a chance, I encourage you to read this article. There are all sorts of articles today. The state is a powerful foe, and it almost crushed Mark Norman. There are all sorts of articles laying out why this is so wrong, because regardless of political stripe, the government there should never be a sniff or a whiff of the government, laying charges to essentially punish somebody. This is what I said to you in my video about SNC-Lavalin. The reason why we have to be concerned about using the judiciary or the justice process as a political tool, as has been alleged in both of these cases, the SNC-Lavalin case and now Mark Norman, is in the SNC-Lavalin case, the Prime Minister stands accused of, or it's alleged that the Prime Minister interfered in the independence of the judiciary to help a friend. In this instance, there's a little bit of a whiff that he's kind of alleged of perhaps using the judiciary to get back at a perceived enemy. And that is the fine line between corruption and a democracy. And we have to protect that. So I think that there's still a lot of questions for the Prime Minister. Some of them include, why wouldn't the Liberals release the documents to Norman's defense team, these ones that could have exonerated him? What is the Prime Minister still trying to hide by doing this? Why only days after Andrew Leslie, this is a former Liberal MP who decided that he was just going to quit, why only a few days after Andrew Leslie offered to testify were the charges dropped? Why did the RCMP lay charges against Mark Norman in the first place? What evidence did Norman's defense team present to the Crown to make them drop the charges? What evidence was in the third-party disclosure that made the Crown drop the charges? Will the Liberals reinstate Mark Norman? And will the Liberals compensate Mark Norman for putting him and his family through this ordeal? And again, think about how much this cost you. Think about how much this cost you. How many millions of dollars were spent in lawyer salaries and fees and whatever settlement is going to come out of this if there are charges laid and found, or if Mark Norman decides to sue the government. How much did this cost you? Outside of all of the things I just raised, there's a cost to this. Even if you voted for Justin Trudeau, you should be concerned about this being the second similar story. There's so many parallels between this and the SNC-Lavalin scandal. This isn't normal in a democracy, folks, and this should not be normalized in Canada. And we shouldn't be, saying dismissing it like it's Justin Trudeau. I'm sure it's all fine. This is not fine, and he needs to be held to account for this, which is why my party has been working so hard in the House of Commons to get these answers and to continue to push for them, certainly into next week. Working hard for you in Ottawa, and please share this video for people who might not understand what happened. Have a great day.